Hello, everybody. Anybody interested in the content or just doing email? When you woke up yesterday, who was surprised by the results of the election? Hands up. And why were we surprised? Because it didn't match the polls, right? So I'm going to give you the missing piece. It's very small print, and I fitted a slide this morning, so thanks for the flexibility. So the pink bars that you can see, that's the number of mentions of the candidate who finally won. Who can tell me what the blue bars are? Come on. OK, so it's all other candidates combined, right? So there is one little element that happens on a channel called social media that typically doesn't get included by the polls, right? And probably quite a bit has been missed. And if you had looked at the data of social media, you would have gathered a bad feeling. I need to switch it before you take pictures, because we're going to release that in the press. OK, so what does that have to do with social media, right? So our vision is to turn all these digital relationships that companies are building up into growth for the companies themselves. And why is that important? 2017, the first time in history online or digital spend will be bigger than TV. So the industry is shifting as a whole. Facebook has a nice piece of that pie. Who knows Facebook revenue 2015? Anyone? Any takers? Come on. Do you know it, Marco? 4 billion? That's almost true, but it's per quarter. So 18 billion was last year. And what I did is I plotted the quarters, the post-IPO quarterly revenues. And the blue bar is Facebook, and that's all the quarters. I also took another company, which all of you guys might know, that went public a couple of years earlier, and I also looked at the post-IPO quarterly revenues. That's Google, right? So it is an increasingly big channel. If you think or still think that social media is something that only teenagers do on their mobile phones, you might be mistaken. There's another element in terms of media. So Facebook's share of media and online media today in the United States is 26%. So more than 1 of 4 minutes that people use on their screens is driven and directed by Facebook. So when you look at the phenomenon of social media, it is morphing more and more into a media channel, right? So it's becoming traditional media. And traditional media logic also applies. And more, these platforms are looking at attention. So every one of you has at least one or several of these supercomputers in the pocket. The only thing that keeps the person who uses this thing from accessing all kind of information, all kind of content, all kind of distraction is one swipe of the finger. So if that's happening, then the key measure of success for these platforms is the actual time spent on the platform. And while the user is inside a platform, and while the user is on a platform, then the companies can monetize that user. It's typically showing them ads, selling them products, etc. Also, it's moving to paid. So almost all the content, if you're a brand or if you're a client of Facebook, you need to pay. We estimate this year spending around $50 billion that are invested in social networks. Last year was around 30 billion. That gives you, with 18 billion, 60% market share of Facebook. But in a world where everything is paid, does it still play a role what content does? Because traditionally, you could buy a given slot of content, a newspaper ad, pre-roll, a cinema ad, TV ad, a banner, regardless on how you acquired it, the price of the slot was done, and then you could fill it with pretty much whatever you wanted. But there has been a tiny little change in the Facebook algorithm that actually puts a value to your content depending on how well your content performs. And that's a decision done by the Facebook algorithm. But again, you want to keep people on the platform. You want to keep them engaged, meaning if you put ads in front of them or content in front of them that they don't like, they will leave. You will have less minutes to monetize, and people don't like it. So that's why there's a penalty for bad content that actually makes you pay more money to put it in front of people. And vice versa, there's a huge incentive on content that interacts very well with the users on how you can make your dollar fly. So a very important point is to focus on what the actual content or what the actual ad quality is. And that's a surprise to many people, but it helps our clients because we've always been looking at the organic or at the viral part of the business, and it's now more true and more important than it ever was. So typically when we work with our clients, we ask them a very nasty questions, and you would be surprised sometimes how not clear or how not clearly targeted it is. So first step is, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve with your social media investment, and how do you measure it? So those two questions sometimes lead to confusion. If you don't nail it, if you don't measure it, then you will have a hard time in improving it and making it better. And so what we've developed is a whole suite of products that helps you, accommodates you across the journey. So it starts with understanding and benchmarking of what's going on. How do I perform? How do different of my brands perform in a certain country? How does one brand perform in the different countries? What works well? What doesn't work well? How do I perform in comparison to competitors and to industry benchmarks? Then you take a next step, coming back to the content. What does good content look like? What does successful content look like? We have a database of 10 billion pieces, and we can give you, for every single event and for every single search you do, we can give you an image of what is content that actually works well around a certain topic. Right? Then we can tell you at what point of time you should be releasing the content, because you want to make sure that your content is published when your audience is online and not when it's offline or when it's just decreasing. And then we tell you on which pieces of the content that are having this good effect, this viral effect, this carrying effect, so where should you be putting your money? And you can subsidize your best pieces of content by just taking out the money that you save from putting it on the wrong pieces. Right? And then in the end, we close the loop and we say, hey, take a look at what you spent and what you got out of it, and then you start the whole loop again. So this is what our software does for about 2,500 clients. It does work for the clients, depending on what parameters you look at. You get improvements 20, 30, 50%, sometimes even higher. And we have many more case studies in that place from automotive, fast-moving consumer goods, etc. So if you apply this logic, then you can actually increase your results dramatically. On our side, on the company, size matters a little bit if you want to crunch that. So we've got a huge database. We store it on many servers. We have a lot of data that we derive these algorithms from and the prediction from. And we've got quite a big team, one of the biggest teams on the planet that does nothing else but this, right? And they're based in Prague and Pilsen in the Czech Republic, which is very fortunate for me as a company because it allows us to stay profitable at levels where somebody who has a similar operation in, let's say, Boston or New York or London would have no chance to do so. So what do you want to take home from this session today? Lots of money is spent on social media. Social media platforms are becoming just traditional media platforms with a little twist on how good the quality of the infusion you do is actually. Everybody should ask themselves the question, what do I want to achieve when I'm active, when I'm investing, and how do I measure that? And last but not least, our software helps you to understand, to manage, and to optimize the way you run your social media investments, and mostly for the better, of course. Thank you very much. If you have got any questions, please bring them on. And then we have a couple of logos, so we serve about 2,500 clients, 20% of the Fortune 500, and many more, and we would welcome every one of you to join the pack. Time for questions? No.
Not really.
Not really. Okay, well, I'll be around. I'll just step off stage, and you can ask me the question individually.
Thank you so much,
Marco.
Robert.